Alright, so this is the first quick episode of what's on my workbench. Uh, First off, we have a Atari 7800 Pro system. This was sent to me for adding S-Video out. I actually had a 7200 when I was growing up, so this is familiar territory for me. Um, it's in pretty typical shape for a unit of its time. It came out in the late 80s, and visually it just has a bit of dust inside, which is really typical. And then the metal. It's actually, if you've never seen one of these before, it's actually quite surprising how modern they look. I mean, this system is over 30 years old, and it doesn't look out of place in a modern setup. It's got a nice brushed steel front. Now let's take a little really fine emery cloth and buff out some of these scratches. And when I work with these units, I actually take everything out. I take all the electronics out because I usually need to get access to the back of the board anyway to go ahead and do some capacitor replacements and then just check out the whole board. So when you have everything's all apart, you can just take this to a sink basically, and just use soap and water, and you can just wash all this dust off. You can get all the dust out of these air vents in the top here. This one's actually not too dusty, just around the cartridge it's dusty, but once you get in the sink, it cleans up right away and gives everything good cleaning, buffing. These old systems are great to work with because there's only 4 screws holding the whole thing together. And since I'm here, I can probably just pop this one open. They're really simple systems to work with. The 7800 was kind of nice because it played most, not all, but most of your 2600 games, which is nice to have that compatibility. So in case you had a large library, you could actually play your 2600 games on it. And there was a few exceptions. There were some of the expanded ROM games, and I think some of the Activision games didn't work all that great. But other than that, it's, I would say, 98% compatible with 2600, unlike the 5200. The 5200 was a very powerful system based in the old Atari 8-bit computer systems, but it was not compatible with the 2600 unless you bought one of these things. This was a cartridge adapter that actually slotted into the 5200, and you put the, basically this was an entire 2600, and all it was used, because even has 2 joystick ports, all they did was basically borrow the power off of it and feed some video signals through, bypassed. It only worked on the 2-port 5200s, doesn't work on the 4-port, which is disappointing because most people actually had the 4-port 5200. So what I'm probably end up doing here is I'm going to modify this and make it a standalone 2600 system. So cartridge goes in here, and just add like a power port on the side of it and use it as a system. But for now, I'm just going to go ahead and finish taking these screws out. 7800 was an 8-bit system, not a 16-bit. 16 bits were coming out around the same time, so it wasn't all that successful because of that. And I always forget that screw. There's no anti-tamper screws. There's no anti-tamper screws or anything like that. They're just regular old Phillips, little self-tapping, about an inch long. Oh, a little bit of fur in there. Owner must have a cat, which is not unusual. You see stuff like this all the time. No biggie. And you can see there's quite a bit of dust internally. There's some dust, but that's to be expected. So with these old systems, what you actually have to do is let's see, it pops forward first, I think. No, this pops up. You kind of tilt it up to clear these joystick ports, and you just kind of lift it out. This little dust. Nothing too weird. There's no dead bugs. I hate running across bugs. That happens too. So to actually, only thing that really goes wrong with these, this one, they want to, the gentleman wants to get a S-video out and I'll throw a composite on there anyway. We're just going to add an S-video out to this, and I'll probably end up replacing this big electrolytic capacitor here. This is a big filter capacitor. It's about the only thing that'll ever go wrong is these will dry out, but real simple to fix. And then this is an RF cover. It was for the FCC, so you don't blast the world with it. Almost all these old systems, without exception, you can at least add. You can add composite out to all of them, S-video out to most, and occasionally you can add like an RGB out, but a lot of times you need to get a dedicated digital signal processor to do that. It's not always feasible. And how these all work, there's these little tabs in here. You gotta twist them so they go straight. Sometimes they work with you well, sometimes they're a little bit of a pain in the butt. If you ever work on these systems, be very careful. This stuff is like shockingly sharp. I mean, I've cut myself more than once working on these old RF shields. Because the problem is these old systems all used, they didn't have composite out. They used what's known as they just modulated the composite signal to be on channel 3 or channel 4 of your TV. So you had to be careful. I worked on one system, it was old Arcadia 2000. What a beast that thing had! It was it wasn't these little tabs. It actually used solder, like a lot of solder. I would say a good 3 ounces of solder holding the shielding down, which is ridiculous because the whole system ran off of 12 volts of all things. It's meant to be used on I think boats and RVs back in the late 70s, early 80s. Just want to be, I mean, you can manhandle these pretty much. I know this is a customer's unit, so I don't want to monkey on it too hard because this wouldn't be very professional, would it? Yeah, I hate these little tabs sometimes. Sorry if that's loud. I keep my tools relatively, basically every time I reach over I have a pegboard to I keep all my tools on. Come on, you little smarmy bugger. Alright, get off there. These old systems sometimes do not want to pop apart. These little tabs, they'll drive you crazy. With modern TVs, actually, you could just leave the shield. I put the shield back generally, but you can actually leave the shield off, and no one uses NTSC anymore anyway, so it's all digital now. Wouldn't even modern TVs won't even pick this thing up anymore. But the old TVs, you'd be spraying. You'd be like a little broadcast station if you didn't have the shield on here. You don't want your neighbors watching you play video games. I think it's one of the greatest weaknesses. See, back when these systems were new, the reason they all used television out is that's what everyone had. There was really no. A lot of the times they didn't even have a of course, there's no composite input. The little composite RCA jacks. There was none of those inputs. And so what happened was they made all these systems so they were just real simple. They just plugged in the TV onto antenna, you put it through a little ohm converter, and you'd be able to go ahead and plug it into literally, well, almost any TV, as long as I had some sort of antenna input. And they used to have these little switch boxes. You would switch in and out your antenna. Why in the world is that one not giving up? Come on, you can do it. Like I said, these little tabs can drive you a little bit bonkers. And you gotta be so careful you don't cut yourself. One of these days I should probably get myself some Kevlar gloves or something, just so I don't cut myself in these things. Boy, that one tab does not want to give up. But these old systems are pretty fun to work with. Just to be mindful, not too much force, not too much heat. I mean, it's 30. Some stuff is 40 years old. You don't want to be monkeying around with old electronics. Heck, you don't want to monkey around with new electronics all that much either. I just took apart one of my own controllers for my PlayStation 3, and it's just amazing. The technology in there, not incredibly different from stuff from like my old Atari Lynx from the late 80s. Same like flex circuits design, nothing. It's like nothing new under the sun. It's kind of crazy. It's like you would think there'd be like new high-tech stuff, but very similar. Alright. Well, I'll finish taking this off later. So that was just a quick what's on my bench today. Next time, tomorrow I'll have this cover off, and I'll go through and show how you replace one of these capacitors. And I'll start building up a S-video outboard for this.